Have you ever stopped fighting with someone you once loved, not because you made peace, but because you stopped caring? Have you watched a relationship die not with a bang, but with a slow fade into nothing? And what does the Catholic Church teach happens to souls when they slip into this quiet, comfortable death? Throughout history, spiritual teachers have warned about something more dangerous than outright sin. It is the slow cooling of love, the gradual settling into comfort, the death by indifference. And few saints saw this reality as clearly as St. Don Bosco, the Italian priest from the 1800s who could read souls like open books. Don Bosco was born on August 16, 1815, in Castelnuovo d'Asti, a small village in the Piedmont region of northern Italy. His father Francisco died when Giovanni was only 2 years old, leaving his mother Margherita Ochiena alone with 3 boys to feed on a failing farm. By the time Giovanni turned 9, he had his first vision, a dream that would shape his entire life. In that dream, a woman radiant as the sun told him something that burned into his memory. "Make yourself humble, strong, and robust," she said. "What you see happening to these wolves becoming lambs, you will do for my children. I will be your teacher. In time, you will understand everything." If you value documented Catholic history and spiritual teaching like this, subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you are hearing this from. The script is researched and factual, drawing directly from the Memorias Biographicas de San Juan Bosco, a 19-volume biographical work compiled by Giovanni Battista Lemoyne and other Salesian priests who lived alongside the saint, as well as his own writings and works like the Catholic provided and the young man provided. These are not popular summaries, but primary source documents preserved in the Salesian archives in Turin. Now back to the information. By 1841, Giovanni Bosco was ordained a priest. His spiritual director, a man named Giuseppe Cafasso, sent him into the prisons of Turin, where he saw teenage boys locked in cages built for animals. These were not hardened criminals. They were street kids, orphans, boys who stole bread because they were starving. The conditions horrified him. Many were sentenced to death. Most had no education, no trade, no hope. Don Bosco, as he was now called, made a decision that would define his life. He would not wait for boys to end up in prison. He would prevent it. He gathered the first group of street children in December 1841 in a field near the church of Sano, Francesco d'Assisi. It was the first oratory, a place where boys could come on Sundays for games, food, prayer, and a sense of belonging. By 1846, he had found a permanent home in the Valdocco district of Turin. His mother Margherita, already old and tired, left the family farm to help him. The boys called her Mama Margherita. She cooked for them, mended their clothes, and loved them like her own sons. Don Bosco did not just feed bodies, he fed souls. He developed what he called the preventive system, an educational method built on 3 pillars: reason, religion, and loving kindness. No beatings, no harsh punishments, just presence, love, and constant guidance. He played soccer with the boys. He taught them trades like printing, shoemaking, and carpentry. He heard their confessions. He said Mass with them every morning. But behind all this visible work was a hidden gift. Don Bosco could see the state of souls. He could look at a person and know if they were in grace or in mortal sin. He could see when death was near. He had visions of heaven, hell, and purgatory so vivid that he wrote them down and shared them with his boys. One of his most famous visions came on the night of May 3rd, 1868. He called it the road to hell. In the vision, a guide led him through a beautiful path lined with flowers and roses. The road seemed pleasant, inviting, comfortable, but it sloped downward, imperceptibly, and boys were walking on it without realizing they were descending. Traps were hidden everywhere, some at ground level, others at eye level, all concealed. The traps had names: pride, disobedience, impurity, envy, theft, gluttony, sloth, anger. But the trap that caught the most boys, Don Bosco said, was human respect. The fear of what others would think, the pressure to fit in, the slow compromise of values to avoid standing out. When boys fell into these traps, they were dragged down the path toward a massive building. Above the door was an inscription that made Don Bosco's blood run cold. Here there is no redemption. The door opened with a roar. Globes of fire burst out, swallowing the boys and dragging them into the abyss. Don Bosco watched in horror as boy after boy, many from his own oratory, rushed toward this door. He saw their faces. He knew their names. His guide told him something crucial. These boys had not died yet. They were still alive, but they were in a state of mortal sin. If they died in that state, they would end up in the place he just saw. Don Bosco cried out, "But then our work is futile if this is the end that awaits so many of the boys. Is there not some way to prevent the loss of so many souls?" The guide's answer was simple and terrifying. There was still hope as long as they continued to do everything in their power to lead young people away from sin and toward salvation. Then the guide did something that would haunt Don Bosco for the rest of his life. He led him through the bronze gates of hell itself. Inside was a vast cavern glowing with unearthly fire. The heat was unbearable. The guide showed Don Bosco room after room, each with an inscription describing the sin that led souls there. One room was marked for sins of impurity, another for pride, another for disobedience, which the guide called the root of all evils. In each room, Don Bosco saw boys he knew, boys from his oratory, boys who had sat in his classrooms, played in his courtyards, received communion from his hands. The guide explained that they were there because of habitual, unrepented sin. At one point, the guide lifted a veil. Underneath was an inscription: "Those who desire to become rich fall into temptation and into the snare of the devil." 1 Timothy 6:9. Don Bosco protested, "This does not apply to my boys. They are as poor as I am. We are not rich and do not want to be." But as the veil lifted, he saw a group of boys in pain. The guide explained, "Their hearts are attached to material objects so that this disordered affection distances them from God. A boy hoards a few coins instead of giving them to a poorer child. Another refuses to share his food. Another dreams of wealth and comfort more than he dreams of holiness. That attachment, small as it seems, becomes a chain." Before they left, the guide forced Don Bosco to touch the wall of hell. "Just once," he said, "so you can say you visited and touched the walls of eternal torments." Don Bosco resisted, but the guide grabbed his hand and pressed it against the stone. The burning was so intense that Don Bosco jumped back and cried out in agony. At that moment, he woke up in his bed, still feeling the searing pain in his hand. The next day, May 3rd, 1868, Don Bosco gathered all his boys and told them what he had seen. He did not sugarcoat it. He did not soften it. He described the road, the traps, the building, the inscription, the rooms, the fire. He told them the names of the sins he saw. He warned them about the dangers of human respect, of impurity, of disobedience, of attachment to material things. But he also told them about the weapons he saw. Knives inscribed with the words meditation and attentive spiritual reading. Swords marked devotion to the Blessed Sacrament, frequent Holy Communion, and devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary, St. Joseph, St. Louis Gonzaga, and other saints. Hammers labeled confession. The boys who used these weapons could cut themselves free from the traps. They could escape the downward path. They could choose life instead of death. This vision was not the only time Don Bosco saw the fate of souls. Throughout his life, he had dozens of prophetic dreams and visions. He saw souls in purgatory begging for prayers. He saw boys who would die within days or weeks and prepared them with special care. He saw the future of the church, the dangers it would face, the attacks it would endure. One of his most powerful teachings was about something that seems harmless but is spiritually deadly: lukewarmness, tepidity, the slow cooling of love for God. Don Bosco wrote to a woman in July 1866, "Tepidity, when it is not promoted by the will, should be totally free of guilt. Indeed, I believe that such lukewarmness, which takes the name of aridity of spirit, is meritorious before the Lord." He was making a distinction. There is a kind of dryness in prayer that comes from human weakness, from fatigue, from the limitations of our fallen nature. This is not sin. This is something even saints experience. But there is another kind of lukewarmness, deliberate, chosen, the kind that comes from repeated small compromises, from choosing comfort over holiness, from settling into a routine of minimal effort. This is the lukewarmness that Scripture warns about in Revelation 3:15. "I know your works. You are neither cold nor hot. Would that you were cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth." Don Bosco preached constantly about this danger. He saw it not just in individual souls, but in relationships, marriages, friendships, families. Two people can stop fighting, not because they have grown in love, but because they have stopped caring. The fire dies. The passion fades. They settle into a cold coexistence. They perform the duties of their state in life with mechanical precision, but no heart. This is spiritual death by inches. The Church has always taught that marriage is a sacrament. It is not just a contract between two people. It is a sacred covenant that joins husband and wife to God. The wedding at Cana in Galilee, where Jesus performed his first miracle, shows us that marriage is blessed by divine presence. Mary was there. She interceded for the couple. The abundance of wine symbolizes the abundance of grace. But grace must be accepted. It must be lived. It must be renewed daily through prayer, sacrifice, and acts of love. Don Bosco knew that many marriages fail not because of dramatic sin, but because of gradual neglect. Couples stop praying together. They stop receiving the sacraments together. They stop making sacrifices for each other. They become roommates instead of spouses, strangers instead of lovers. And when love grows cold in a marriage, it often grows cold in the soul as well. The same pattern appears in spiritual life. A person who once prayed fervently now prays mechanically. A person who once received communion with tears of joy now receives it out of habit. A person who once fought against sin now tolerates it, excuses it, even embraces it. This is the lukewarm soul, neither hot nor cold, neither fully alive nor fully dead, comfortable, complacent, convinced that everything is fine. Don Bosco warned that this state is more dangerous than open sin because the lukewarm soul does not feel the need for conversion. The sinner who knows he is a sinner can repent. The lukewarm soul who thinks he is fine will not seek healing. Saint Teresa of Avila said, "May God preserve you from willful sins, however small. The small sins, the venial sins, the compromises we make every day, these are the termites that eat away at the foundation of spiritual life." St. Gregory the Great wrote, "The soul never stays on the spot where it falls. Whoever falls into deliberate venial sins habitually, without feeling pain at it and without thinking of correcting himself, does not remain where he is, but will go on and fall down a precipice." The Council of Trent defined this clearly. We cannot persevere in grace without a special extraordinary help from God. But God will justly refuse this special help to one who does not abstain from willfully causing him continual displeasure. Do you see the pattern? The lukewarm soul commits small sins repeatedly. God withdraws his special protection. The soul becomes vulnerable. Temptation grows stronger. Resistance grows weaker. And eventually the soul falls into mortal sin. This is why Don Bosco urged his boys to visit Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament as often as possible. He said, "If you want to be lukewarm, make few visits to Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. If you want to be good, make many visits. If you want to be very good, make very many visits." He was not speaking metaphorically, he meant it literally. The Eucharist is the antidote to lukewarmness. It is the fire that reignites cold hearts. It is the medicine that heals sick souls. Don Bosco also emphasized devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. He said, "Were it not for the Blessed Virgin and the Blessed Sacrament, the world would now be in ruins." On May 30th, 1862, he had another famous vision. He saw a great ship, the Church, sailing through a stormy sea. Enemy ships surrounded it, firing cannons, trying to sink it. The Pope stood at the helm. In the middle of the sea, two massive columns rose high into the sky. On one column was a statue of the Immaculate Virgin Mary with the inscription, "Help of Christians." On the other column was a large host, the Eucharist, with the inscription, "Salvation of the Faithful." The Pope steered the ship toward the two columns. Enemy ships attacked relentlessly. The Pope was wounded, died, and was replaced by a new Pope who continued steering toward the columns. Finally, the ship reached the columns and anchored itself between them. At that moment, the enemy ships sank. The storm calmed. The Church was saved. Don Bosco explained the vision clearly. The two pillars that will save the Church are devotion to Mary and frequent communion. These are not optional. They are essential. They are the two sources of light in a dark world. When Don Bosco died on January 31st, 1888, he had founded the Salesian Society, a religious order now the second largest in the Catholic Church. He had established 250 houses around the world, caring for 130,000 orphans and training 18,000 apprentices annually. But his greatest legacy was not the buildings or the organizations. It was the souls he saved, the boys he pulled from the road to hell, the men he formed into priests and saints, the families he taught to love God and each other. One of those boys was Dominic Savio, who died at age 14 in 1857. Don Bosco said Dominic achieved sanctity not through dramatic penances, but through small, faithful acts of love. He obeyed promptly. He prayed fervently. He avoided even the smallest sins. He encouraged his classmates to do the same. Dominic's motto was, "Death rather than sin." He meant it. He chose holiness over comfort, sacrifice over pleasure, God over everything else. This is the opposite of lukewarmness. This is the fire that Don Bosco wanted to ignite in every soul. The question is not whether you have dramatic visions, like Don Bosco. The question is whether you are choosing holiness or settling for mediocrity. Are you hot or are you lukewarm? Are you fighting sin or tolerating it? Are you growing in love or letting it die by inches? Are you using the weapons Don Bosco described? Confession, communion, prayer, devotion to Mary? Or are you walking down the beautiful road lined with roses that slopes imperceptibly toward the door marked no redemption? The traps are still there. Pride, disobedience, impurity, envy, attachment to material things, human respect, the fear of what others will think. The weapons are still there too. The sacraments, prayer, devotion, sacrifice, the choice to love even when it is hard, the decision to care even when it would be easier to stop caring. If you value this kind of in-depth Catholic teaching, subscribe and comment from where you are watching. This is the work we do. Now back to the story. Don Bosco told his boys that the most dangerous moment in spiritual life is not when you are fighting and failing. It is when you stop fighting, when you make peace with sin, when you convince yourself that you are fine because you are not committing mortal sins, even though your heart has grown cold. He saw it in marriages. Couples who once loved each other deeply now coexist without passion. They do not fight because they do not care enough to fight. The relationship is not dead in the technical sense. They are still married. They still live together. But the life has drained out of it. He saw it in spiritual life. People who once pursued holiness with zeal now go through the motions. They attend Mass on Sunday, but their minds are elsewhere. They say prayers, but their hearts are not in it. They receive communion, but feel nothing. This is the quiet death, the slow fade, the comfortable hell, and Don Bosco saw where it leads. In his vision of hell, he did not just see hardened criminals and notorious sinners. He saw ordinary people, people who thought they were fine, people who had convinced themselves that small sins do not matter, people who chose comfort over conversion. The guide in his vision explained something crucial. The boys he saw in torment had not died suddenly in mortal sin. They had slid into it gradually, one small compromise at a time, one unrepented venial sin at a time, one moment of choosing ease over effort at a time, until the accumulation of small choices became a single fatal choice, until lukewarmness became coldness, until indifference became damnation. But the vision also showed hope. The boys were still alive. There was still time. As long as they were breathing, they could repent. They could turn back. They could choose the weapons instead of the traps. Don Bosco spent his entire life helping souls make that turn. He developed a spirituality that was joyful, not grim. He told his boys, run, jump, shout, but do not sin. He played games with them. He made them laugh. He showed them that holiness does not mean being miserable, but he never compromised on the truth. Sin is real. Hell is real. Lukewarmness is deadly. And the only way to stay on the narrow path is to stay close to Jesus in the Eucharist and to Mary, the Mother of God. His spiritual father, Giuseppe Cafasso, had taught him this. Cafasso was known as the priest of the gallows because he spent so much time ministering to condemned prisoners. He prepared them for death. He heard their confessions. He walked with them to the scaffold. Cafasso knew what happened to souls who died unprepared. He saw the terror in their eyes. He heard their desperate pleas for more time. And he trained Don Bosco to do everything possible to prevent souls from reaching that moment of despair. Don Bosco took that mission seriously. He heard confessions for hours every day. He celebrated Mass every morning. He visited the Blessed Sacrament constantly. He prayed the Rosary daily. He asked his boys to do the same. He knew that spiritual life is like a fire. You have to feed it constantly. If you stop adding wood, the fire dies. If you stop praying, stop receiving the sacraments, stop fighting sin, your love for God will grow cold. And a cold soul is a dead soul. Don Bosco also understood the power of community. He did not just save individual souls, he built communities of faith. The oratory was not just a school, it was a family. The boys prayed together, ate together, worked together, played together. They held each other accountable. If one boy was falling into sin, another would encourage him to go to confession. If one boy was struggling, others would pray for him. If one boy was excelling in virtue, others would try to imitate him. This is the preventive system in action. You do not wait for souls to fall. You surround them with love, support, and constant presence so they never fall in the first place. And when they do fall, because everyone falls, you help them get back up immediately. Confession was central to Don Bosco's spirituality. He taught his boys to confess frequently, even weekly. He explained that confession is not just for mortal sins. It is also for venial sins, for weaknesses, for struggles. It is the hammer that breaks the chains. He told them a story about a soul in purgatory who came to thank him. The soul had been suffering for years because of unconfessed venial sins. When the soul finally received prayers and masses from the living, the suffering ended and the soul entered heaven. The lesson was clear. Small sins matter. They have consequences not just in this life, but in the next. Do not wait until they accumulate. Confess them, repent of them, break free from them. Don Bosco also emphasized the importance of the present moment. He had a placard in his room that read, "Every moment is a treasure." One of his boys, Francis Basuco, saw it and asked, "How can you earn a treasure every moment?" Don Bosco answered, "It is easier than you think. Every moment we can increase our knowledge, do a good deed, or make an act of love of God. In his sight, these are treasures to benefit us now and in eternity. This is the antidote to lukewarmness. Do not think about tomorrow. Do not dwell on the past. Focus on this moment, right now. What can you do right now to love God? What small act of kindness can you perform? What temptation can you resist? What prayer can you say? String together enough faithful moments and you build a faithful life. String together enough faithful days and you build a faithful year. String together enough faithful years and you build a faithful eternity. But if you let moments slip by in indifference, if you allow days to pass in lukewarmness, if you permit years to drift in spiritual mediocrity, you're not building anything. You're slowly eroding. You're quietly dying. And you may not realize it until it is too late. Don Bosco saw this pattern over and over. He would have a vision of a boy who would die soon. He would not tell the boy directly, but he would assign another boy to be his friend, to encourage him to pray, to invite him to confession, to walk with him toward holiness. Sometimes it worked. The boy would repent, receive the sacraments, and die in a state of grace. Sometimes it did not. The boy would ignore the invitations, avoid confession, and die unprepared. The difference was not in Don Bosco's efforts, it was in the boy's choices. Free will is the hinge on which eternity swings. God offers grace to every soul. He sends messengers, warnings, opportunities. But he does not force. He invites, he waits, he hopes. And if a soul refuses the invitation, God respects that choice, even though it breaks his heart. Don Bosco understood this mystery. He worked tirelessly to save souls, but he knew that ultimately each person must choose. He could provide the weapons. He could remove obstacles. He could pray, teach, encourage, and love. But he could not make the choice for them. That is why he was so urgent. That is why he spent himself completely. That is why he slept only a few hours a night and worked until he collapsed. He knew that time was short. He knew that souls were at stake. He knew that every moment mattered. His motto was simple: give me souls and take away the rest. He did not care about comfort. He did not care about wealth. He did not care about fame. He cared about souls, saving them, sanctifying them, leading them to heaven. And he did it with joy, not grim determination, but genuine joy, because he knew the secret. The closer you get to God, the happier you become. The more you give yourself away, the more you find yourself. The more you die to self, the more you truly live. This is the paradox of Christian life. To save your life, you must lose it. To find joy, you must embrace sacrifice. To avoid lukewarmness, you must burn with love. Don Bosco burned. He consumed himself for souls. And when he died on January 31st, 1888, his last words were a prayer for his boys. He asked Mary, help of Christians, to protect them. He asked Jesus in the Eucharist to nourish them. He asked them to remain faithful. Thousands attended his funeral. Millions have been inspired by his life. The Salesian order he founded continues his mission in over 130 countries. Schools, orphanages, parishes, youth centers, all carrying on the work of preventing souls from walking down the road to hell. But the real question is not about Don Bosco, it is about you. What road are you walking? Are you using the weapons or falling into the traps? Are you hot or lukewarm? Are you building treasures moment by moment or letting moments slip away? Are you close to Jesus in the Eucharist and to Mary, help of Christians, or have you drifted away from the two pillars? Are you fighting for your marriage, your friendships, your relationships, or have you stopped caring? Are you alive in grace or dead in indifference? The choice is yours. God will not force you, but he is offering you everything: grace, mercy, forgiveness, healing, life. All you have to do is reach out and take it. All you have to do is choose. In 1868, when Don Bosco shared his vision of hell with his boys, he ended with a warning and a promise. The warning was this: if you die in mortal sin, there is no redemption. The door of hell has an inscription that reads, "Here there is no redemption." But the promise was this: as long as you are alive, there is hope. As long as you're breathing, you can turn back. As long as you have a heartbeat, you can choose life over death, love over indifference, God over everything else. Don Bosco spent his entire life making sure his boys knew that. No matter how far they had fallen, no matter how many times they had failed, no matter how cold their hearts had become, there was always a way back. The sacraments, the church, prayer, Mary, Jesus. The weapons were always available. The path to holiness was always open. The only question was whether they would use the weapons or ignore them, whether they would choose fire or settle for lukewarm water. In the Salesian archives in Turin, there is a letter Don Bosco wrote in 1884. He was exhausted, sick, barely able to walk. But he wrote to a benefactor, "Do not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up." He never gave up. He never settled. He never stopped fighting for souls. Even when his body was failing, he kept going. Because souls were at stake, because eternity was real, because lukewarmness was deadly, because love demands everything. That is the lesson Don Bosco left us. Not a comfortable spirituality, not an easy path, not a lukewarm faith, but a burning love, a total gift, a life consumed for God and for souls. A few years after Don Bosco's death, the cause for his canonization began. On April 1st, 1934, Pope Pius XI declared him St. John Bosco. The Pope said Don Bosco was a phenomenon of charity. He gave everything for the love of God and for the salvation of souls. The examination of his body in 1929 revealed something astonishing. His heart was unusually large. The doctor said they had never seen anything like it. His heart had literally expanded from constant love. And he is still giving. Millions pray to St. John Bosco every year. The miracles continue. The conversions continue. The work continues. Because the battle continues. The road to hell is still there, beautiful and flower-lined, sloping downward. The traps are still hidden: pride, disobedience, impurity, envy, attachment, human respect. They still catch souls. But the weapons are still available too. The sacraments still work. Prayer still moves mountains. Mary still intercedes. Jesus still saves. The question is whether you will use them, whether you will choose fire over lukewarm water, whether you will fight or surrender, whether you will care or stop caring, whether you will live or quietly die. Don Bosco answered that question for himself on August 16th, 1815, the day he was born. He chose life. He chose fire. He chose love. And he never looked back. On the wall of the Basilica of Mary Help of Christians in Turin, there's a fresco depicting Don Bosco surrounded by his boys. Above it is an inscription in Latin, Da mihi animas sederatale. Give me souls and take away the rest. That was his prayer. That was his mission. That was his life, and it can be yours too. But let us go deeper into what Don Bosco taught about relationships, about marriage, about the slow death of love that happens when people stop caring. The Church teaches that marriage is one of the 7 sacraments. Don Bosco wrote extensively about the sacraments in his book, The Month of May, consecrated to Maria, Most Holy Immaculate, published in 1858. He explained that the 7 sacraments are channels through which heavenly favors are communicated from divinity to humanity. Marriage, he wrote, is not just a civil contract. It is a sacred covenant that gives special graces to help married couples with life's difficulties, especially to help them raise their children as loving followers of Christ. When a man and woman marry in the Church, they are not just making promises to each other, they are entering into a covenant with God. The wedding at Cana shows this clearly. Jesus was there. Mary was there. The divine presence blessed the union. Don Bosco saw what happened when that divine presence was forgotten. Couples who started with fervent love gradually cooled, not because of dramatic sins, but because of small neglects. They stopped praying together, they stopped receiving communion together, and they stopped making sacrifices for each other. The fights became more bitter, the silences became longer, until one day they were not fighting anymore. Not because they had learned to love better, but because they had stopped caring enough to fight. He could look at a married couple and see the state of their souls. He could see when grace was flowing and when it had dried up. He could see when love was alive and when it had died. Spiritual death in a marriage does not just harm the couple. It harms their children. It harms the church. It harms society. St. John Paul II wrote that the split between the faith that many profess in their daily lives must be counted as one of the more serious errors of our age. Don Bosco understood this long before Vatican II. He called it living a unity of life, bringing God into everything. He told his boys, run, jump, shout, but do not sin. Enjoy life, but never separate that joy from God. The same principle applies to marriage. A couple should work together, play together, and in all of it, God should be present. Prayer should be as natural as conversation. Sacrifice should be as normal as breakfast. Forgiveness should be as automatic as breathing. But this requires effort. And this is where lukewarmness creeps in. The couple gets busy, life gets complicated, and prayer becomes the first thing to go. Days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, months turn into years. They still go to Mass on Sunday, maybe. They still call themselves Catholic, probably. But the fire is gone. The passion is dead. And when their relationship with God is cold, their relationship with each other becomes cold too. Don Bosco wrote in his letters that devotion and spiritual fervor must be united with the exercise of virtue and operative charity. Faith without works is dead. Love without action is empty. He saw marriages where couples said they loved each other but never showed it, where they performed the minimum required duties but never went beyond. This is lukewarmness in marriage. Doing just enough to avoid open sin, but not enough to build real love. And the children see it. They learn that this is what Christianity looks like. Cold, obligatory, joyless. Don Bosco knew this. That is why he emphasized joy. That is why he made faith attractive, desirable, worth pursuing. He showed them that holiness means being fully alive, burning with love for God and for others. Don Bosco also emphasized frequent confession. He told his boys to confess at least once a week. Confession is preventive medicine. It keeps small problems from becoming big problems. It keeps venial sins from accumulating. The same principle applies to marriage. Couples who regularly examine their relationship, who regularly seek and offer forgiveness, these couples stay healthy. Couples who never talk about problems, who let resentments build, these couples slowly poison themselves. Don Bosco would counsel someone who had let small sins accumulate for months. The sins themselves were not grave, but the accumulation had created a hard crust around the heart. Grace could not penetrate. The solution was always the same. Break the crust. Confess everything. Start fresh. Commit to not letting it build up again. This is why he insisted on frequent confession. Not because people were terrible sinners, but because he knew how easy it is to drift. Your spouse should be your closest spiritual friend, the person who knows your struggles, who prays for your salvation, who encourages you when you are weak. But this only happens if both people are committed. If one person is pursuing holiness and the other is lukewarm, the tension will be unbearable. Don Bosco saw marriages like this, one spouse on fire for God, the other indifferent. Sometimes the fervent spouse gives up and becomes lukewarm too. Sometimes, by God's grace, the lukewarm spouse wakes up and catches fire. his advice was always the same. Pray, sacrifice, be patient, love without demanding, trust God. He told the story of Saint Monica, who prayed for her son Augustine for 17 years. Augustine was living in sin, rejecting the faith. But Monica never gave up, and eventually Augustine converted. He became one of the greatest saints in church history. The same can happen in marriages. A lukewarm spouse can wake up, a cold heart can thaw, a dead love can resurrect. But it requires supernatural intervention. You cannot argue someone into loving God. You cannot nag someone into holiness. All you can do is pray, sacrifice, love, and trust that God is working even when you cannot see it. Don Bosco also taught about the power of small acts. He said, "Every moment is a treasure. You do not need to do great things. You need to do small things with great love. A kind word to your spouse, a helping hand, a moment of listening, a choice to forgive, a decision to pray instead of complaining. These small acts, done consistently, build a strong marriage. But if you wait for big moments to show love, if you only make an effort when you feel like it, your marriage will slowly die. People who only prayed when they felt inspired never grew. They stayed lukewarm. The remedy is simple but hard. Do the right thing even when you do not feel like it. Pray even when prayer is dry. Love even when love is costly. This is what it means to be hot instead of lukewarm, to choose deliberately, to act intentionally, to refuse to coast." Don Bosco lived this way. There were days when he was exhausted, sick, discouraged, but he never stopped. He never settled into comfortable routine, and when he died, his heart was physically enlarged. The doctors said they had never seen anything like it. His heart had literally expanded from the constant outpouring of love. This is the opposite of lukewarmness. This is fire. This is what we are called to, not just in personal spiritual life, but in every relationship. In marriage especially, because marriage is supposed to be an image of Christ's love for the church. Christ loved the church so much that he died for her. He gave everything. He held nothing back. He burned himself out completely. That is the model for Christian marriage. Husbands are called to love their wives as Christ loved the church. This is about total self-gift, dying to self so the other can live. When both spouses are doing this, the marriage becomes a living icon of the Trinity. Love giving and receiving, life flowing and returning, joy multiplying and expanding. But when one or both become lukewarm, the icon cracks. The sacrament is still valid, but its power is blocked. Don Bosco saw sacramental marriages that were spiritually dead. He saw couples who had received the grace but had not cooperated with it, and it broke his heart, because he knew what they were missing. He knew the joy they were forfeiting. So he preached, he wrote, he counseled, he prayed, he did everything he could to wake people up. That is the message for today, for you. For your marriage, for your relationships, wake up. Stop settling, stop coasting, choose fire, choose life, choose love. Use the weapons Don Bosco described: confession, communion, prayer, devotion to Mary. Refuse to let your love grow cold. Refuse to stop caring, because souls are at stake, and eternity is real, and the choice is yours.